The first Star Wars Battlefront was kind of just okay, but so far everything we've seen from Battlefront 2 actually seems pretty cool. Besides the loot box controversy anyway. So here are 10 things you need to know about Star Wars Battlefront 2. Starting off at number 10, I've seen some confusion online as to who was actually involved in the development of this game. There are actually 3 development teams that are working on Battlefront 2. The new Starfighter Assault mode is actually being worked on by Criterion Games, who made the PlayStation VR Rogue One X-Wing mission. And unfortunately, they have stated that there will be no VR support for Battlefront 2. Then we have Motive Studios, who's actually helping with the campaign, while DICE is focusing mostly on the multiplayer and anything else, seeing that that's what DICE does best. Moving on to number 9, I always loved how in the original 2 Battlefront games that you got a good mix of content from the original trilogy and the prequels. It was just so much fun flopping back and forth between the two. And then when DICE released their first Battlefront, it was kind of a bummer that it only focused on the original trilogy and didn't even acknowledge The Force Awakens besides adding the Jakku map. Even then, it just still wasn't enough. But with Battlefront 2, that all changes. There's stuff from all the movies, characters, maps, weapons, starships, you name it. Now I get to watch Rey and Darth Maul run around fighting each other, and I think that's really all that anyone wants. It's gonna give me that same feeling I had playing the first 2 Battlefronts, which was just me being a kid, sitting on the carpet bashing my Star Wars toys together. And moving on to number 8, Strike Mode is one of the new game modes added to Battlefront 2. It's an objective-based mode, but on a smaller scale than a Galactic Assault. It focuses more on infantry than it does on heroes and vehicles, but there are still more powerful characters that you can play as, like a rocket trooper for example. If you checked out the beta, you actually probably played it already. Rebels had to hold down Maz's castle and protect an artifact, while the First Order had to attempt to retrieve it, bringing it back to their ship. I definitely think it's one of the cooler modes in the game, because I do like objective-based modes, but Galactic Assault is just a little too big for me, and I can't play that all the time. And coming in at number 7, while we're on the topic of game modes, let's take a look at Starfighter Assault, which is what we're getting instead of Fighter Squadron. The Starfighter battles in the first Battlefront were really just kinda eh. The controls were kind of weird and stiff, but this time around everything has been reworked, and flying around actually feels really good and is a lot of fun. Criterion reworked the entire system to just feel way more natural and way more fun and fluid. If you've played the beta and checked out Starfighter Assault, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I was surprised by how much I actually enjoyed that game mode. It was definitely noticeably better than in the previous game, and that's coming from someone like me who doesn't like any sort of aerial combat usually. Starfighter Assault will have you either defending or attacking a capital ship, which you do by finishing different objectives. And just like every other mode, there are classes. We have interceptors, fighters, and bombers. And you can also spawn in as a hero ship once you've earned enough battle points. Some of those hero ships consist of the Slave One, Millennium Falcon, or even Poe Dameron's Black One. Like I said before, this mode is a lot of fun, and I can't wait to play more of it. And moving on to number 6, Battlefront 2 is now class-based, and each one has its own sets of perks. There's the officer who uses smaller blasters and also has the ability to apply powerful buffs to any teammates that are around them. The specialist, who acts as the sniper class and uses traps. The assault class, which is your generic middle-of-the-road class, being better at close to medium range and makes use of blaster rifles. Then you have my personal favorite, the heavy class, who uses LMG-like blaster rifles and has the ability to deploy a personal shield around them. Each class really does feel different, and when used correctly along with other classes, you can really make a difference while playing. They definitely aren't the deepest class builds, but it's definitely a small step forward from the previous game, and I'll really take anything I can get at this point. Next up at number 5, this wouldn't be a Star Wars Battlefront game without a good handful of heroes to play as in multiplayer. And this time around, DICE is actually giving us heroes that span across all 3 eras of Star Wars, which is great because the first game didn't really have the variety of characters I think most of us wanted. While EA has only officially announced a few of the heroes that are going to be included, the full list did leak over on Reddit, and it's right from the game's code, so this should be pretty accurate. On the Rebel side, we have Chewbacca, Han Solo, Lando, Leia, Luke, Rey, and Yoda. And then on the Empire side, we have Boba Fett, Bossk, Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, General Grievous, Kylo Ren, Darth Maul, Captain Phasma, and Iden Versio. I would say that this is a pretty solid and also semi-predictable list, although Bossk and General Grievous kind of surprised me. I know Bossk was in DLC in the first game, but I just assumed that's because they were, trying to stay within the original trilogy and they were running out of heroes to use. And I will say that I'm super surprised to see Grievous on this list because I just assumed that everyone was like me and just didn't give a shit about that character, but maybe I'm in the minority on that, I don't know. Keep in mind that Finn wasn't listed in the leak, and that's because he's going to be an add-on character along with Captain Phasma, and with all the DLC being free, I'm sure we're going to get a ton more characters added to this roster down the line. Heroes have also been changed a little bit too. For example, their health has been lowered, so they aren't the walking tanks that they were in the first game. They're still powerful, and seeing Darth Vader coming running towards you is still pretty scary, but they aren't overpowered anymore, which is fine in my book. And next up, at number 4, one of the biggest complaints about the first Battlefront was that the game had a season pass that cost just as much as the game did, which really sucked because they put out a good amount of DLC with maps and heroes, and you had to throw more money at the game to play them. And it was pretty dumb because the base version of the game didn't really have all that much content to begin with. But EA heard everyone's complaints, and this time around they are making all of the future DLC for Battlefront 2 free. The DLC is going to be broken down into seasons, and each season will bring new maps, new heroes, new vehicles, and new weapons. The first season starts in December and will focus on The Last Jedi, which brings Finn and Captain Phasma to the roster. I think it's great that all the DLC is going to be free because it doesn't fracture the player base at all. Everyone is going to have access to all the same stuff at the same exact time, which is good. But EA does need to make that extra money somewhere, and while we're getting all the DLC for free, EA will be adding loot boxes to Battlefront 2, which brings us to our next point at number 3. I'm sure you've seen all the negative buzz around exactly what's inside these loot boxes and how they gave players an edge over other players and how it was weaved in with the progression system way too much. But in a move that actually surprised me and I'm sure other people, EA heard all the criticism and they actually made some changes to how the loot boxes work. So now Epic Star Cards, which is the highest tier star card you can drop, will no longer be droppable in crates. Instead, now they'll only be available through crafting, which helps to keep a level playing field. You'll also now need to reach a certain rank before you even have the ability to craft star cards. So you aren't able to just buy a ton of crates, get a bunch of crafting materials, and craft really powerful star cards right away. The only way to get the ability to craft higher tier star cards is by actually playing the game and ranking up that way. While there are some weapons that will still be found in crates, the majority of them are now tied to completing specific milestones. So if there's a certain class weapon you really want, you're gonna have to just play as that class to unlock that weapon, which is exactly how it should be. The same goes for class specific gear and items. These fixes definitely address the biggest complaints that players have had from the beta, and as surprised as I am that EA did make some changes, I think it's really good that they did, because what they had in place was way too close to a pay-to-win structure, and that definitely scared a lot of players, myself included, away from the game. Coming in at number 2, the first Battlefront not having a campaign was a huge miss, and a lot of players, myself included, were pretty upset that it wasn't there. Thankfully, this time around, there is going to be a campaign included, and it actually seems really cool, and it's what I'm the most excited for about Battlefront 2, because it doesn't seem like they just threw it in just to do it. It actually seems really interesting. It takes place immediately after the Death Star is destroyed in Return of the Jedi, and it spans all the way to Force Awakens, although we don't know if it ends right before or during the events of that movie. You actually play as the bad guys. You play as Iden Versio, the leader of the Inferno Squad, which is kind of like the Empire's Black Ops Squad. And after witnessing the second Death Star explode from Endor, you're tasked with hunting down the rebellion and restoring the rule of the Empire. I don't know about you guys, but I am hyped on the idea of playing as the other side. Motive Studios is handling the campaign, and they've been saying that they never address you as a bad guy, but instead you're just the other side of the conflict. The idea of watching the Death Star get destroyed at the end of Return of the Jedi being this big win, this big celebration, just get flipped into being a huge loss for who you're playing as in the campaign is just really cool and really interesting. The campaign trailers have all been really fun to watch too. They even show Luke Skywalker and Kylo Ren in them, so I'm curious to see how they're written into the story, and I really hope that it isn't overdone and it's more of like a cameo. There's actually a full cutscene out there that you can watch, and I think it's awesome. It seems straight out of one of the movies, and it's done really well. I don't know, I'm just super excited to play this game and get a different perspective on the conflict that's been present in all of the Star Wars movies. Present in all the ones that matter anyway. And finally, number 1, there is some housekeeping to get out of the way. Star Wars Battlefront 2 releases on November 17th on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Pre-ordering does get you access to 6 Epic Star Cards and The Last Jedi outfits for both Rey and Kylo Ren. There's also a deluxe edition that costs $20 more that comes with those pre-order bonuses and upgraded versions of all 4 character classes, 4 epic ability upgrades for each class, instant access to The Last Jedi and Millennium Falcon with updated sounds and appearance, and it also gets you early access to the game, letting you play 3 3 days earlier than everyone else. It will be both Xbox One X and PS4 Pro enhanced. There's not much information about what exactly it does yet, but on PS4 Pro there is a 1080p 60 frames per second mode, but I'm sure we'll see the same thing or something similar on the Xbox One X. And those are 10 things you need to know about Star Wars Battlefront 2, but we want to hear from you. So meet us down in the comments and let us know what you think. How do you feel about the changes EA made to the loot boxes? Does it make you feel better about picking Battlefront 2 up? And what are some maps and heroes you'd like to see added in through DLC later down the line? And as I'm sure you already know, hitting the like button really helps us out and we do appreciate it. And if you're new here for some reason, we put out videos like this every single day, and the best way to get them is by subscribing to the channel. As always, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.